The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Emma, we've decided to keep the anniversary celebration intimate this year. Family only. You understand? I stared at my phone, sitting in my small East Austin apartment, knowing that in 12 hours, the venue coordinator would be calling to confirm final details for the event I'd secretly been planning and paying for over the past 6 months. The event my parents just told me I wasn't invited to. The event that was supposed to celebrate their 30 years of marriage, but somehow, once again, had no room for their eldest daughter. And before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and for 28 years, I've been perfecting the art of being invisible in my own family. Not the dramatic kind of invisible where you're acting out or causing scenes, but the quiet kind where you learn early that your voice doesn't quite carry the same weight as everyone else's. Growing up in Westlake Hills, our house was always buzzing with activity around my younger sister Sofia. She was the kind of child who commanded attention just by breathing. Golden curls that caught sunlight like a halo, a laugh that could fill entire rooms, and this natural magnetism that drew people to her like moths to a flame. By the time she was 5, Sofia was already booking local modeling gigs for children's clothing stores. By 10, she was the lead in every school play. By 15, she had more followers on social media than some celebrities. Me? I was the one behind the camera, literally and figuratively. While Sofia posed for family photos, I was usually the one taking them. While she charmed relatives at gatherings, I was in the kitchen helping Aunt Rosa with dishes, listening to her stories about the old country and soaking up the only genuine attention I seemed to get from anyone in our extended family. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't neglected in the traditional sense. I had food, clothes, a roof over my head, and parents who showed up to most of my school events. But there's a difference between being cared for and being seen, and I learned that difference early. My parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, were loving people who genuinely believed they were good parents. They just had this way of making everything about Sofia feel urgent and important, while everything about me felt optional and convenient. When I was 12, I won the regional science fair with a project about water conservation. I remember running home with the blue ribbon, bursting through the front door, ready to share my excitement. I found my parents huddled around Sofia's laptop, frantically responding to comments on a YouTube video she'd posted about her morning skincare routine. The video had gone viral overnight, gaining 50,000 views and catching the attention of a teen beauty brand. "Mom, Dad, I announced, holding up my ribbon. "That's wonderful, Mida." My mother said, barely glancing away from the screen, "Sofia, you need to respond to this brand representative right now. They want to send you free product." My father looked up long enough to nod approvingly at my ribbon before turning back to help Sofia craft the perfect response email. The blue ribbon went onto the refrigerator, right next to Sofia's kindergarten artwork and a grocery list. By the end of the week, it had disappeared entirely, probably thrown away during one of my mother's cleaning sprees. But Sofia's first brand partnership contract, that got framed and hung in the living room. This became the pattern of our household. My achievements were met with polite acknowledgement, while Sofia's were treated like national holidays. When I made honor roll throughout high school, it earned me a good job at dinner. When Sofia's Instagram post about her homecoming dress got featured on a local news station's social media segment, we had a family celebration complete with champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for us kids. I learned to find validation elsewhere. My English teacher, Miss Patterson, noticed my writing and encouraged me to submit pieces to literary magazines. I won several small contests, but when I brought home the acceptance letters, they somehow always arrived on days when Sofia had bigger news. A modeling callback, a brand collaboration, another viral moment that required the full family's attention and strategic planning. The summer before my senior year, I applied for and was accepted into a competitive internship at a boutique marketing firm downtown. It was unpaid, but it was real experience working with actual clients on genuine campaigns. I was thrilled because marketing felt like the perfect blend of creativity and strategy. and for the first time I was doing something that was entirely my own. My parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, Emma. Very practical," my father said when I told them over dinner. Then he immediately turned to Sofia to discuss her latest opportunity, to be featured in a local magazine spread about Austin's rising young influencers. The internship changed everything for me though. I discovered I had a natural talent for understanding what makes people connect with brands and messages. I was good at seeing the big picture while managing tiny details. I could coordinate moving parts and timelines, anticipate problems before they happened, and somehow make everyone feel heard and valued in the process. My supervisor, a sharp woman named Patricia Kim, took me under her wing and taught me that marketing wasn't just about selling products, it was about telling stories that mattered. "You have something special, Emma," Patricia told me during my final week. "You understand people. You see what they need before they even know they need it. That's not something you can teach." I carried those words with me through college at UT Austin, where I studied marketing and communications while Sofia built her online empire from her high school bedroom. By the time I graduated, she had 500,000 followers and was making more money from brand partnerships than my father made at his accounting firm. Meanwhile, I was proud of my solid GPA and the job offer I'd received from a mid-sized events and marketing company called Creative Connection. Creative Connections specialized in corporate events, product launches, and private celebrations for Austin's growing professional community. It wasn't glamorous work, but I loved the puzzle of bringing someone's vision to life. Every event was a story waiting to be told, and I got to be both the author and the director. My parents attended my college graduation. Of course, they took photos and smiled proudly, but I could see my mother's fingers twitching toward her phone throughout the ceremony, probably checking Sofia's latest post. Sofia herself was in Los Angeles that week for a brand summit, but she sent a sweet congratulations video that got more enthusiastic reactions from our extended family than my actual degree. After graduation, I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in East Austin. It wasn't much: thin walls, a kitchen barely big enough for one person, and a view of the parking lot. But it was mine. I decorated it with plants and artwork from local artists, creating a space that felt calm and intentional. For the first time in my life, I lived somewhere that reflected who I was, rather than accommodating who everyone else needed me to be. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into every project, staying late to perfect proposals and arriving early to handle last-minute client requests. Within 2 years, I was managing my own accounts and building a reputation for events that were both flawlessly executed and genuinely memorable. My clients trusted me because I listened to what they actually wanted, not what I thought they should want. But success at work only highlighted how little recognition I received at home. Family dinners were still dominated by Sofia's latest collaborations, her growing influence, and my parents' pride in how she was building her brand. When I mentioned landing a major client or successfully managing a particularly complex event, the response was always the same: polite approval followed by an immediate pivot to Sofia's news. The hardest part wasn't the lack of attention. I'd made peace with that years ago. The hardest part was watching my parents invest so much emotional energy in Sofia's online persona while remaining genuinely uninterested in who I was becoming as a person. They knew Sofia's content creation schedule, her follower demographics, and her brand partnership rate, but they couldn't tell you what I did at work beyond something with events, and they'd never once visited my apartment. Last Christmas, Sofia surprised our parents by hiring a professional photographer to take family portraits for her social media. The photos were beautiful: golden hour lighting in Zilker Park, everyone dressed in coordinated earth tones, genuine laughter captured in frame after frame. When Sofia posted them with a heartfelt caption about family being everything, the post got over 100,000 likes and hundreds of comments about how perfect our family looked. Looking at those photos, you'd never guess that I'd spent the entire shoot feeling like a background extra in someone else's story. You'd never know that when Sofia tagged everyone except me in the initial post, claiming it was an oversight when I mentioned it privately. You'd never know that my suggestion to take some photos without phones and ring lights was dismissed because natural light is only good for like 20 minutes. Emma? But I kept showing up because that's what you do for family, right? You keep showing up even when it hurts, even when you feel invisible, even when you start to suspect that your absence wouldn't change the dynamic at all. Which brings me to 6 months ago, when my mother mentioned over Sunday dinner that she and my father were thinking about doing something special for their 30th anniversary in December. We want to celebrate how far we've come, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my father's hand. 30 years of marriage, both girls grown and successful, all our dreams coming true. Sofia immediately started brainstorming social media opportunities, talking about hiring a videographer to document the celebration and maybe partnering with some local vendors for content. My parents' eyes lit up at her enthusiasm, but I was thinking about something else entirely. I was thinking about how my parents had given me life and love, even if they'd never quite figured out how to see me clearly. I was thinking about how they'd worked hard to build a good life for our family, and how they deserved to be celebrated in a way that reflected the magnitude of 30 years together. Most of all, I was thinking about how this could be my chance to finally show them who I'd become, what I was capable of, and how much their happiness meant to me. So I made a decision that would change everything. The next Monday, I walked into Patricia Kim's office. She'd become a client after starting her own consulting firm, and pitched her an idea. What if Creative Connections donated services for a beautiful anniversary celebration? It would be great publicity for the company, I argued, and a chance to showcase our ability to create intimate, meaningful events. Patricia saw right through me, of course. This is for your parents, isn't it? I nodded, feeling heat rise in my cheek. I know it's not very professional to... Emma.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She interrupted gently. It's not unprofessional to love your family, but I need you to be honest with me. Are you doing this because they asked, or because you need them to see? The question hit me like a physical blow because I knew the answer immediately, and it wasn't pretty. I was doing this because I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to understand what I was capable of. I wanted to create something so beautiful and meaningful that they couldn't ignore my contribution to their happiness. Both, I admitted, they deserve something special, and I want to be the one to give it to them. Patricia studied me for a long moment before nodding. Okay, but we do this right. Professional quality, full documentation, and your name on everything as the lead coordinator. If you're going to make a statement, make it count. Over the next 6 months, I poured everything I had into planning the perfect anniversary celebration. I booked the grand ballroom at Hotel Magnolia, the most elegant venue in downtown Austin. I arranged for their original wedding photographer to surprise them by recreating some of their engagement photos. I hired a string quartet to play the song from their first dance. I coordinated with extended family to create a memory book filled with photos and stories from their 3 decades together. Every detail was personal and meaningful. The centerpieces incorporated flowers from my mother's garden. The menu featured dishes from the restaurant where they had their first date, which had long since closed. I even tracked down the baker who had made their original wedding cake, and convinced her to come out of retirement to create a replica. The cost was significant. Almost all of my savings plus a personal loan I'd taken out specifically for this purpose, but I'd never felt better about spending money on anything in my life. This wasn't just an event, it was my love letter to them, my way of saying thank you for everything they'd given me, and my proof that I'd grown into someone worthy of their pride. I told them I was helping with some planning but kept the details vague, wanting everything to be a surprise. Sofia was handling the social media coordination, of course, and my parents were focused on guest lists and outfit selection. Everything was falling into place perfectly, until Tuesday night when my phone buzzed with that text message that changed everything. Emma, we've decided to keep the anniversary celebration intimate this year, family only. You understand, I read it 3 times before the words actually penetrated. Family only. As if I wasn't family. As if the daughter who had spent 6 months and thousands of dollars creating their perfect celebration wasn't worthy of witnessing it. I called my mother immediately. Nijo, it's nothing personal, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Sofia suggested that with all the photography and videography, it might be better to keep the guest list small, just immediate family, and a few close friends. You know how these things can get overwhelming, but I am immediate family, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Of course you are, sweetheart, but Sofia's documenting everything for her platforms, and she thinks too many people might make it hard to get good content. Plus, you know how you get at these family things. You always end up working instead of enjoying yourself. This way you can just relax and celebrate with us afterward. The irony was suffocating. I was being excluded from the event I'd planned and paid for because my sister wanted better lighting for her social media content, and my parents thought I'd end up working anyway. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. In 12 hours, David Chen, the venue coordinator, would call to confirm final details for Saturday's event. In 4 days, over 60 people would gather to celebrate my parents' marriage in the beautiful space I'd designed for them, eating food I'd selected, listening to music I'd chosen, surrounded by flowers I'd arranged, and I wouldn't be there to see any of it. For the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than disappointment or hurt. I felt rage, pure, clean rage, at the injustice of being erased from my own generosity. Rage at being treated like an inconvenience in my own family. Rage at having spent 28 years hoping that the next gesture, the next achievement, the next sacrifice would finally earn me a permanent seat at their table. But beneath the rage was something else, a clarity I'd never experienced before. For the first time, I could see the situation exactly as it was, without the filter of hope or desperation that had colored my perception for so long. My parents didn't exclude me because they didn't love me. They excluded me because in their minds, I wasn't really there to begin with. I was the helpful daughter who could be counted on to understand, to be flexible, to sacrifice without complaint. I was the supporting character in their family story, valuable for what I could provide, but not essential for what they were trying to create. And tomorrow, when David Chen called looking for the event sponsor, everything was about to change. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp December air that makes Austin feel almost like a real winter city. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night staring at my ceiling and rehearsing conversations I'd never have. Part of me kept hoping my phone would ring with an apology, an explanation, maybe even an invitation back into my own event, but morning came in silence. I was sitting at my kitchen table, mechanically eating cereal and scrolling through work emails, when my phone rang at exactly 9:15 a.m. David Chen's name appeared on the screen, and my stomach dropped. "Emma, good morning." David's warm voice filled my small kitchen. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to touch base about Saturday's Rodriguez anniversary celebration." I cleared my throat, buying time. "Of course. What can I help you with?" "Well, we've got everything confirmed on our end, but I realized we never finalized the seating chart for the head table. Also, Miss Rodriguez called yesterday asking about additional photography restrictions for the videographer, and I wanted to make sure any changes go through you first since you're our primary contact." My mother had called the venue directly. Of course she had, probably to discuss Sofia's content needs without involving me. "What kind of restrictions?" I asked, though I already knew. "Something about limiting guests in certain areas during filming, creating clear sightlines for the camera." Pretty standard stuff for social media documentation, but it affects our service flow. "Should I send you the revised layout they're requesting?" I stared out my apartment window at the morning traffic, watching people drive to jobs where they felt valued and families where they felt seen. The absurdity of the situation hit me fresh. Here was David Chen, treating me like the respected event coordinator I was, while my own family had relegated me to the status of unwelcome outsider. "Actually, David, I need to ask you something." When my mother called, did she happen to mention anything about the guest list? There was a pause, Not specifically, should she have. We've got everything set for 62 guests based on your final count last week. 62 guests. I had confirmed that number myself, including my own seat. A seat at the table I'd designed, for the event I'd crafted with 6 months of careful planning and genuine love. Did she mention me at all? The question escaped before I could stop it, and I immediately felt foolish for asking. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry, Emma. I don't understand. Is there an issue with your involvement in the event? His confusion was so genuine that I almost laughed. To David Chen, I was the event coordinator who had exceeded every expectation, who had thought of details no one else would consider, who had transformed a simple anniversary dinner into something truly magical. The idea that I might not be attending my own creation was incomprehensible to him. It's complicated family dynamics, I said, finally. Can you tell me exactly what my mother requested? She wanted to know if we could rope off a section near the windows for uninterrupted filming, and she asked about having the videographer set up in the back corner where guests wouldn't block the shots. She also mentioned wanting to control the lighting timing for some kind of special presentation during dinner. Sofia's content creation setup, of course. The anniversary celebration I'd designed as a meaningful tribute to 30 years of marriage was being reorganized around optimal Instagram lighting. David, hypothetically speaking, what would happen if the event sponsor needed to make last-minute changes to arrangements? The event sponsor? He sounded confused again. You mean, creative connections? Emma, you've been handling everything directly. If you need to make changes, just let me know. You have full authority over every aspect of the event. Full authority. The irony was breathtaking. I need to think about some things, I said. Can I call you back later today? Of course, but Emma, is everything okay? You sound stressed, and honestly, you've planned one of the most thoughtful events we've ever hosted. Your parents are going to be amazed. His kindness was almost my undoing. This stranger understood the care I'd put into every detail, while my own family saw my exclusion as a reasonable accommodation for better camera angles. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen as morning light shifted across the table, illuminating the stack of anniversary planning folders I'd been living with for months. Every vendor contract, every timeline, every carefully chosen detail bore my signature and reflected my vision for their perfect day. I picked up the folder labeled Final Timeline, and flipped through pages of minute-by-minute coordination. 5:30 arrival for vendor setup, 6:15 guest arrival, 7 o'clock welcome cocktails featuring my father's favorite bourbon, and my mother's preferred wine, 7:30 dinner service beginning with the butternut squash soup, from the restaurant where they'd had their first date anniversary dinner 15 years ago. 8:45 the surprise video montage I'd spent weeks compiling from family footage. 9:15 dancing to their original wedding playlist, which I'd tracked down from the DJ who'd worked their reception 3 decades earlier. Every moment planned with love, every detail chosen with meaning, every surprise designed to honor their journey together, and according to their daughter who'd planned it all, I'd somehow be too distracting to witness any of it. My phone buzzed with a text from Sofia. Mom told me about the guest list thing. Don't take it personally, Em. You know how these events are better with fewer people. Plus, you can help me edit the video content afterward. Your marketing eye would be so helpful. I read the message 3 times, each reading making me angrier. Don't take it personally, as if being excluded from my own family's milestone celebration was somehow a professional decision rather than a personal rejection. As if my value was limited to helping Sofia create content about moments I wasn't allowed to experience. But what struck me most was the casual assumption that I'd be grateful for the opportunity to help edit footage of the event I'd planned but wasn't permitted to attend. The complete lack of awareness that this might be hurtful was somehow more painful than deliberate cruelty would have been. I was about to respond when another text arrived, this one from my Aunt Rosa. Mija, I just got the strangest call from your mother. She said you're not coming to the anniversary party. Did something happen? Miguel and I were looking forward to seeing you there. My throat tight. Aunt Rosa had been the one person in my extended family who consistently remembered my birthday, who asked about my work with genuine interest, who treated my achievements as worth celebrating. She and Uncle Miguel had been planning to attend,
since I'd first mentioned the party months ago. I called her immediately. "Emma, sweetheart, what's going on?" Her voice carried the same warmth it had when I was 12 and hiding in her kitchen while Sofia commanded attention in the living room. "It's complicated, Tia Rosa. Family politics, my foot," she said with the directness I'd always loved about her. "Your mother said something about the party being too small for everyone, but when I asked who everyone meant, she got vague. Are you in some kind of fight with them?" "Not exactly a fight," I said carefully. "More like I'm finally understanding my place in the family hierarchy." "Emma Rodriguez, you stop talking like that right now. You're their daughter, and you've been nothing but good to them your whole life. I remember when you were 16 and worked all summer to buy your mother that necklace for her birthday. I remember when you helped your father with his computer problems every weekend for 2 years. I remember when you drove to San Antonio in the middle of the night when your grandmother was in the hospital, and Sofia was too busy with some photo shoot to come." Her words hit me like a physical weight. I'd forgotten about some of those moments, the way you forget breathing until someone points out that you're doing it, but Aunt Rosa remembered. She'd been watching, even when it felt like no one was. "They don't see it that way," I said quietly. "Then they're not looking hard enough." "Emma, I don't know what's happening with this party, but I want you to know something. Miguel and I, we see you, we've always seen you, and if you're not going to be there Saturday night, then we need to talk about whether we should be there either." The offer shocked me. Aunt Rosa and Uncle Miguel weren't dramatic people. They didn't make grand gestures or issue ultimatums, but they were talking about skipping my parents' anniversary celebration if I wasn't welcome. "Tia, you don't have to do that. This isn't your fight, Mija. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, and you've been showing up your whole life while other people took credit for the light you brought into rooms. Maybe it's time someone showed up for you." After we hung up, I felt something shifting inside my chest. For months, I'd been focused on creating the perfect tribute to my parents' marriage, the perfect demonstration of my love and capabilities, but I'd been thinking about it all wrong. The event wasn't about proving my worth to people who'd already decided I was optional. It was about celebrating love and commitment, and family in its truest form. And true family, I was beginning to understand, wasn't always the people who shared your DNA. I spent the rest of Wednesday reviewing every contract, every vendor agreement, every detail of Saturday's celebration. Creative Connections was listed as the coordinating company, but my personal signature was on every document. My credit card was on file for final payment. My phone number was the emergency contact. In every legal and practical sense, I wasn't just attending this event, I was hosting it. By evening, I'd made a decision that scared and exhilarated me in equal measure. I called David Chen back. "David, it's Emma. I need to make some changes to Saturday's event." "Of course, what do you need?" "First, I want to add 2 guests to the seating chart. Rosa and Miguel Hernandez will need a table near the front. They're family members who deserve to be prominized for this celebration." "No problem. Where would you like me to move them from?" "They're not moving. They're additions. We'll have 64 guests instead of 62. I could hear him making notes. "Got it. What else?" "Second, I want to add a special recognition moment during the evening. Nothing dramatic, just an acknowledgement of everyone who made the celebration possible. Family members, vendors, anyone who contributed to making the night special." "That sounds lovely. When would you like to schedule it?" "After dinner, before the dancing. I'll handle the specifics." "Perfect. Anything else?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, I want to make sure you have my contact information, as the primary for any day of issue. If anyone from the family calls with changes or requests, please direct them to me first. Emma, you've been the primary contact from the beginning. Nothing's changed on our end, but everything had changed on mine." Thursday morning brought a flurry of vendor confirmation calls, each one reinforcing the reality of what I'd built. The florist called to confirm delivery of the centerpieces, featuring flowers from my mother's garden.
The photographer called to verify the timeline for recreating my parents' engagement photos. The string quartet called to double-check the acoustic setup for their performance. Each conversation reminded me of the months of work, the careful coordination, the love I'd poured into every detail. This wasn't just an event I'd planned. It was a masterpiece I'd created from scratch. a celebration worthy of the 30-year love story it was meant to honor. By Thursday afternoon, I'd received 3 more texts from Sofia about video editing and 2 calls from my mother about logistical details she wanted to confirm. Each interaction proceeded as if my exclusion from the guest list was a settled matter, a reasonable accommodation that any understanding daughter would accept without question. But I was no longer the understanding daughter who absorbed disappointment without complaint. I was the woman who'd built something beautiful and meaningful, and I was finally ready to claim ownership of my own generosity. Part 3. The memories surface Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay inside with tea and melancholy thoughts. I'd taken the day off work to handle last-minute event coordination, but also because I needed time to process what was about to happen. In 24 hours, the celebration I'd created would unfold without me, unless I decided to change that narrative. I found myself pulling out photo albums I hadn't looked at in years, searching for evidence of the family dynamics I'd spent decades trying to rationalize. The pictures told a story I'd never let myself see clearly before. There was my 8th birthday party, where I'd specifically asked for a small gathering with just a few friends. In every photo, Sofia occupied the center of attention despite it being my celebration. She was only 6, but somehow the party had reorganized itself around her natural charisma. I appeared in the background of most shots, smiling politely while other kids gravitated toward my little sister's infectious energy. I found my high school graduation photos, where my parents flanked me with proud smiles that looked genuine but felt performed. In the candid shots after the ceremony, they were already turned toward Sofia, who was commanding attention from relatives with stories about her latest modeling gig. Even my graduation had become a networking opportunity for her growing brand. The college photos were worse because they were few. My parents had attended the important ceremonies, but there were no casual shots of campus visits, no proud parent moments captured during the everyday milestones that actually matter. Meanwhile, Sofia's high school experience was documented like a professional portfolio, every achievement and appearance carefully photographed and celebrated. But it was the recent photos that hurt most. Last year's Christmas morning, where Sofia's gift opening had been orchestrated like a photo shoot, complete with outfit changes and multiple angles for optimal social media content. I appeared in exactly 3 photos, all background shots where I was helping clean up wrapping paper or setting up the next present reveal. My parents weren't cruel people. They loved me in their way, provided for me, supported my education and basic needs. But love and attention are different things, and looking at years of photographic evidence, it was clear which daughter had received both, and which had received only one. The most damning photo was from Sofia's high school graduation party 2 years ago. It had been held at our family home, with elaborate decorations and catered food. Sofia glowed in her cap and gown, surrounded by family and friends who'd come to celebrate her achievement. But it was the background of one particular photo that caught my attention. There I was, 26 years old, standing alone near the kitchen door with a plate of untouched food, watching my sister's celebration with an expression I barely recognized. It wasn't sadness or jealousy on my face, it was resignation. The look of someone who'd learned not to expect inclusion in moments of joy, even within her own family. I'd been so focused on being the good daughter, the understanding one, the low-maintenance child who didn't require emotional resources, that I'd made myself invisible, and my family, comfortable with the dynamic I'd enabled, had stopped seeing me as a person with needs and feelings of my own. My phone rang, interrupting my archaeological dig through family history. Jenna Park's name appeared on the screen, and I felt a rush of relief. Jenna had been my college roommate and remained my closest friend, one of the few people who knew the real dynamics of my family relationship. "Hey, stranger." Her warm voice filled my apartment. "I haven't heard from you in weeks. How's the anniversary party planning going?" I'd mentioned the event to Jenna months ago, but hadn't shared the recent developments. Hearing her casual question, I felt tears threatening for the first time since Wednesday's text message. "It's complicated," I managed. "Emma Rodriguez." I know that tone. What happened? Jenna had this way of cutting through pretense that I'd always valued, even when it made me uncomfortable. I found myself telling her everything. The months of planning, the financial sacrifice, the text message, Sofia's content requirements, the casual assumption that I'd accept exclusion without protest. Wait, Jenna interrupted when I finished. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You planned and paid for this entire celebration, and now they're telling you not to come because your presence might interfere with your sister's social media documentation. Hearing it summarized so starkly made the situation sound even more absurd. That's the basic situation. Yeah, Emma. That's not family dynamics. That's exploitation. The word hit me like cold water. I'd been thinking about this in terms of hurt feelings and family politics, but Jenna was right. I'd been financially and emotionally exploited, and the people doing it had convinced me that my reaction was the problem. I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. I said, maybe I should just accept that this is how our family works and be grateful that they're happy. Jenna's voice rose. Emma, listen to yourself. You're talking about being grateful for the privilege of funding your own exclusion. That's not normal family dysfunction. That's abuse. Abuse. Another word I'd never applied to my situation, but one that resonated uncomfortably. Not the dramatic kind of abuse that left visible scars, but the subtle kind that convinced you your own needs were unreasonable, your own hurt was oversensitive, your own value was conditional on how useful you could be to other people. What would you do? I asked. I'd show up anyway. It's your event, Emma. You planned it, you paid for it, and you deserve to be there. Let them explain to their guests why they're trying to exclude the person who made their celebration possible. The suggestion was both terrifying and appealing. I'd spent so many years avoiding conflict, accommodating others' needs, making myself smaller to avoid discomfort. The idea of asserting my right to attend my own creation felt revolutionary. I don't know if I have the courage for that kind of confrontation. Emma, you had the courage to plan a 6-month event coordination project while working full-time. You had the courage to invest your savings in your parents' happiness. You had the courage to track down their original wedding vendors and recreate details from 30 years ago. Don't tell me you don't have courage. You've just been directing it toward making other people comfortable instead of protecting yourself. After we hung up, I sat with Jenna's words and the photo albums scattered around my coffee table. The evidence was overwhelming, but it wasn't evidence of my inadequacy. It was evidence of a family system that had trained me to accept crumbs while serving full meals to others. I thought about Aunt Rosa's offer to skip the celebration if I wasn't welcome. I thought about David Chen's confusion when I suggested I might not attend the event I'd coordinated. I thought about all the vendors who knew me as the capable professional who'd orchestrated every detail of Saturday's celebration. Most of all, I thought about the woman I'd become despite my family's inability to see her clearly. I'd built a successful career based on understanding what people needed and delivering beyond their expectations. I'd created a life filled with meaningful work and genuine friendship. I'd developed skills and perspectives that had value far beyond my utility to my family's emotional ecosystem. For the first time in my adult life, I started to consider what I wanted rather than what others expected from me. And what I wanted was to witness the celebration I'd created, to see my parents' faces when they realized the depth of thought and care that had gone into their perfect evening, to finally receive recognition for the gift I'd given them. But more than that, I wanted to stop hiding from conflict, stop accommodating dysfunction, stop enabling a dynamic that diminished my worth and discounted my contributions. I wanted to show up as myself, fully and unapologetically, regardless of whether that made other people comfortable. That evening, I called David Chen one more time. David, it's Emma. I need to make one final change to tomorrow's arrangements. Of course. What can I help you with? I need you to prepare a brief announcement for during the recognition moment we discussed. Something simple acknowledging that the evening was coordinated and sponsored by Creative Connections, with special thanks to the lead planner who designed every detail as a labor of love. That sounds perfect. Should I mention you by name? I looked around my apartment at the anniversary planning materials that had consumed my life for 6 months, at the photo albums that told the story of decades spent hoping for recognition that never came, at the vision board where I'd collected inspiration for the perfect celebration of enduring love. Yes, I said. Mention me by name. Part 4. The Breaking Point. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of December day that makes Austin feel like the most beautiful city in the world. I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Today, everything would change. I'd spent Friday night creating a detailed timeline for myself, just as I would for any major event. 8 a.m. Final vendor confirmations. 10 a.m. Venue walkthrough with David Chen. Noon, personal preparation and decision finalization. 6 p.m. Arrival at Hotel Magnolia for the celebration I'd created. The vendor calls went smoothly. The florist confirmed that the centerpieces featuring my mother's garden flowers were ready for delivery. The photographer was excited about recreating the engagement photos, and had even tracked down props similar to those from the original session 30 years ago. The string quartet had practiced the playlist I'd provided, and felt confident about the acoustic setup in the ballroom. Each conversation reinforced my professional competence and the quality of what I'd built. These vendors knew me as someone who delivered excellence, who thought of details others missed, who created experiences that exceeded expectation. In their eyes, I wasn't the optional daughter or the understanding sister. I was the skilled coordinator who'd orchestrated something genuinely special. At 10 a.m., I drove downtown to Hotel Magnolia for my final walkthrough with David Chen. The grand ballroom was already being transformed according to my specifications, and seeing my vision come to life took my breath away. The round tables were positioned perfectly to encourage conversation while maintaining clear sightlines to the head table. The centerpieces created intimate conversation spaces without blocking anyone's view of the planned presentations. The lighting was warm and golden, designed to make everyone look their best while creating the romantic atmosphere appropriate for an anniversary celebration. But it was the personal touches that made the space truly special. The memory station I'd created featured photos from every decade of my parents' marriage, arranged chronologically to tell the story of their growing family and evolving dreams. The display included images from their wedding, early anniversaries, the births of their daughters, family vacations, and recent celebrations, a visual timeline of 30 years spent building a life together. The music corner showcased the evolution of their relationship through song. Not just their wedding dance selection but the songs that had played during significant moments throughout their marriage. I'd interviewed extended family members to compile this playlist, gathering stories about the music that had soundtracked their love story. Most meaningful was the tribute corner, where I'd arranged acknowledgments of everyone who'd contributed to their happiness over 3 decades. Thank you notes to the friends who'd supported them through difficult times, recognition of the family members who'd celebrated their joys, appreciation for the mentors and colleagues who'd shaped their professional lives. "Emma, this is extraordinary," David said as we completed our walk. "I've coordinated hundreds of events, but I've never seen someone put this level of personal thought into every single detail. Your parents are going to be overwhelmed." His words should have filled me with pride and anticipation. Instead, they highlighted the central tragedy of my situation. I'd created something beautiful and meaningful, and the people it was designed to honor had decided I wasn't worthy of witnessing their reaction to it. "David, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. If you'd spent 6 months planning the perfect celebration for people you loved, and they told you not to attend because your presence might interfere with someone else's social media content, what would you do?" He stared at me for a long moment, processing what I'd just revealed. "Emma, are you telling me your family doesn't want you at this event?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. The event you planned and coordinated and funded? The very same." David Chen was a diplomatic professional who'd built his reputation on handling delicate family situations with grace and discretion. But even his practiced composure couldn't hide his shock at what I'd just shared. He struggled for words. "That's not how family is supposed to work." "No," I agreed. "It's not. What are you going to do?" I looked around the ballroom one more time, taking in every detail I'd planned with love and precision. The space was perfect. The celebration would be everything I'd envisioned. My parents would have the meaningful, beautiful anniversary party they deserved. "I'm going to show up," I said. "This is my creation, and I'm going to witness what I've built." David nodded slowly. "Good. You deserve to be here. And when I make that announcement tonight, acknowledging your work, I'm going to make sure everyone understands exactly what you've given your family. Driving home from the venue, I felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration that reminded me of the moment before jumping off a high dive. There was no going back from the decision I'd made. Tonight, I would attend the celebration I'd created, regardless of whether my family welcomed my presence. But first, I had one more call to make. Aunt Rosa, it's Emma. Mija, how are you feeling about tonight? Miguel and I have been thinking about you all day. Actually, I want to ask you something. You said yesterday that you'd consider not attending if I wasn't welcome. Did you mean that? Of course we meant, Emma, what your parents are doing isn't right, and we won't pretend otherwise by celebrating while you're excluded. What if I told you I was going to attend anyway? What if I told you I'd decided to show up regardless of what they want? There was a pause, and then I heard Uncle Miguel's voice in the background. Tell her we'll be right beside her. You heard your uncle, Aunt Rosa said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. We'll be right beside you. It's time your parents learned that you're not optional, Emma. You never were. The afternoon passed in a strange suspended state where I felt both completely calm and absolutely terrified. I took a long bath, painted my nails a confident red, and chose my outfit with more care than I'd given to any wardrobe decision in years. I selected a midnight blue dress that I'd bought for work events, but never had occasion to wear. It was elegant without being flashy, sophisticated without trying too hard. Most importantly, it made me feel like the competent, successful woman I'd become rather than the forgotten daughter I'd been trained to see myself as. As I got ready, I thought about all the times I'd prepared for family events with anxiety about whether I'd be noticed, whether I'd say the right things, whether I'd somehow earn a moment of genuine recognition. Tonight felt different. I wasn't preparing to audition for my family's approval. I was preparing to claim ownership of my own generosity. At 5:30 I received a text from Sofia, getting ready at Mom and Dad's. Can't wait to document everything tonight. The lighting is going to be perfect. I didn't respond. Let her discover my presence the same way I'd discovered my exclusion, as an unexpected reality that demanded immediate adaptation. At 5:45, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won. Emma, sweetheart, I hope you're having a nice evening. Your father and I are getting ready for the party and we just wanted you to know we're thinking of you. The casual dismissal in her tone was breathtaking. She was calling to acknowledge my exclusion as if it were a minor inconvenience, rather than a fundamental rejection. Actually, Mom, I'll be thinking of you too, very closely. That's sweet, Mija. Maybe we can have lunch tomorrow and I can tell you all about how everything went. That won't be necessary. I see everything for myself. I hung up before she could respond. At 6 p.m. I stood in my apartment looking at myself in the full-length mirror. The woman reflected back wasn't the uncertain daughter who'd spent decades hoping for scraps of attention. She was polished, confident, and ready to attend the celebration she'd created with her own hands and heart. I picked up my purse, checked that I had my invitation and identification, and headed for the door. Tonight, I would finally discover what happened when the invisible daughter decided to be seen. Part 5. The Confrontation. The grand ballroom at Hotel Magnolia was already alive with conversation and laughter when I arrived at 6:15. Through the elegant glass doors, I could see my creation in full bloom, guests mingling around the cocktail station, admiring the memory displays, and settling into the warm golden lighting I'd spent weeks perfecting. I paused for a moment outside the entrance, watching the celebration unfold exactly as I'd envisioned it. My parents stood near the memory station, my father pointing out photos to relatives, while my mother beamed with obvious joy. Sofia moved through the crowd with a professional photographer in tow, documenting candid moments with the practiced ease of someone who'd turned family events into content opportunities. Everyone looked happy, elegant, and perfectly at home in the space I'd designed for them. It was beautiful to witness, and for a brief moment, I almost understood why they'd thought the evening would be complete without me. I'd made myself so invisible for so long that my absence felt natural rather than tragic. But then I saw Aunt Rosa and Uncle Miguel standing near the entrance, clearly watching for my arrival. When our eyes met through the glass, Aunt Rosa's face lit up with a pride and excitement,
that I'd rarely seen directed toward me from family members. Uncle Miguel straightened his shoulders and nodded at me with the kind of respect that felt like recognition. In that moment I remembered why I was here. Not to force my way into a space where I wasn't wanted, but to claim ownership of a gift I'd given freely and a celebration I'd created with love. I walked through the entrance doors with my head high and my heart steady. The first person to notice me was David Chen, who approached immediately with a warm smile and obvious relief. "Emma, you look absolutely stunning. I'm so glad you decided to attend. Your parents haven't stopped raving about the details all evening." His voice carried just enough volume to announce my presence to nearby guests, several of whom turned to look at me with curious expression. I recognized most of them, extended family members, family friends, colleagues of my parents, but realized that many of them probably didn't know who I was, or what role I'd played in creating the evening they were enjoying. "Thank you, David. Everything looks perfect." "It is perfect, and that's entirely thanks to your work. Are you ready for the recognition announcement we discussed?" Before I could answer, I heard my mother's voice rise above the ambient conversation. "Emma, what are you doing here?" The question carried across the space with enough surprise and confusion to draw additional attention. Conversations paused as guests turned to witness this unexpected family drama unfolding in real time. I walked toward my parents with the measured pace I'd learned from years of professional event coordination. No rushing, no dramatic gestures, just confident movement toward a destination I'd earned the right to reach. "I'm attending the anniversary celebration," I said simply. "The one I planned for you." My father's expression moved through several emotions, before settling on practiced diplomatic calm. "Sweetheart, we discussed this. Tonight is family only. I am and more than that, I'm the event coordinator who designed every detail you've been enjoying this evening." Sofia appeared at our small circle with her photographer still trailing behind, her face a mixture of annoyance and calculation. "Emma, this is really awkward timing. We're trying to document authentic family moments, and having you here creates complications." The casual cruelty of her statement was so stunning that several nearby guests actually gasped. Aunt Rosa moved closer to our group, her expression shifting from supportive to protective. "Complication," I repeated. "Sofia, I'm not a complication. I'm the person who made this evening possible." "You know what I mean," Sofia said, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she used when trying to smooth over situations she'd created. "Your family, of course, but tonight is about Mom and Dad, and having too many people creates distractions from the real story." "The real story," I said, loud enough for more guests to hear clearly, "is that I spent 6 months planning this celebration. I coordinated with every vendor, designed every detail, and invested my savings to create the perfect tribute to 30 years of marriage. The real story is that you excluded me from witnessing the results of my own work because you were worried I might interfere with your social media content." The silence that followed was deafening. Guests who'd been admiring the centerpieces and memory displays suddenly understood that the daughter standing before them was the architect of everything they'd been praising. The elegant evening they'd been enjoying wasn't just a party, it was a labor of love created by the woman who'd just been called a complication. My mother's face had gone pale. "Emma, let's not do this here. We can talk about this privately later." "No, Mom. We're going to talk about this right here, right now, in front of all the people who are benefiting from my work." I gestured around the ballroom. "These centerpieces, I grew the flowers in your garden and arranged them myself. That memory display, I spent weeks collecting photos and stories from everyone in this room. That playlist, I interviewed family members to compile songs that represented your relationship journey. The photographer recreating your engagement photo, I tracked him down and convinced him to come out of retirement for tonight." I could see understanding dawning on faces throughout the room. Extended family members who'd complimented my parents on the beautiful details were realizing that the forgotten daughter had created everything they'd been admiring. "The menu featuring dishes from your first date restaurant? I found the original chef and convinced her to recreate the recipe. The string quartet playing your wedding songs, I researched your original DJ's playlist and had them arrange the music specially for tonight. Even the table arrangement encouraging conversation while maintaining clear sight. That was my professional event coordination expertise, making sure everyone would feel included and valued." My voice was steady, but I could feel emotion building behind my words. I gave you everything I had to make this night perfect. I sacrificed my savings, my time, and my professional expertise, because I wanted you to feel celebrated and loved, and you repaid that gift by telling me I wasn't welcome to witness what I'd created. Sophia tried to interrupt. Emma, you're being dramatic. We never said you weren't welcome. We just thought, you thought wrong. I cut her off. You thought you could use my work to create your content while erasing my presence from the story. You thought you could benefit from my love while discarding my work. The ballroom had fallen into the kind of silence that feels heavy and electric, where every person present understands they're witnessing something that will be remembered and discussed for years. I could see my reflection in the horrified expressions of family friends who'd known me since childhood, but had never seen me assert myself with such clarity and conviction. Uncle Miguel stepped forward, his weathered hands clasped behind his back in the posture I remembered from family gatherings where he'd mediated disputes between cousins. But this time he wasn't mediating, he was choosing sides. Emma is right, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd observed our family dynamics for decades without interference. Rosa and I have watched this pattern for years, and we should have spoken up soon. Emma has been the backbone of this family's celebrations, the one who remembers birthdays and organizes gatherings, and makes sure everyone feels special, and she's been invisible while doing it. Aunt Rosa moved to stand beside her husband, her expression fierce with protective love. Miguel and I were prepared to leave tonight if Emma wasn't welcome. We came because we wanted to support Carlos and Maria's anniversary, but we stayed because Emma deserves to see her work appreciated. My mother's composure was cracking, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. This is our anniversary celebration. This isn't the time or place for family therapy. Actually, Mom, this is exactly the time and place, I said, because everyone here is witnessing the results of my love and effort, and they deserve to know who created what they're experiencing. More importantly, I deserve recognition for what I've given. I turned to address the broader room, my voice projecting with the confidence I'd developed through years of professional presentations. I want everyone here to understand something. The reason tonight feels so special, so thoughtful, so perfectly tailored to celebrating my parents' love story, isn't because it happened by magic. It's because I spent 6 months researching their history, tracking down meaningful details, and coordinating every aspect of this celebration as a gift of love. Conversations began rippling through the crowd as guests processed this information. I could see recognition dawning on faces, as people remembered complimenting my parents on details that had actually been my creation.
The cognitive dissonance was visible. How could the daughter who'd been treated as optional be the architect of everything they'd been praising? Sofia's photographer had stopped documenting, clearly uncomfortable with the family confrontation unfolding before his lens. Sofia herself looked trapped between her instinct to control the narrative and her realization that the narrative had moved beyond her influence. Emma, I think you're misunderstanding the situation, my father said, attempting to regain control with his practiced diplomatic tone. We never meant to exclude you. We simply thought you'd prefer not to work during a family celebration. Work? I laughed, and the sound carried more bitterness than I'd intended. Dad, attending the celebration I planned isn't work. It's experiencing the fruits of my labor. It's witnessing the joy I created. It's receiving acknowledgement for a gift that cost me thousands of dollars and months of my life. Thousands of dollars. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. $15,000, to be exact. My savings plus a personal loan to ensure that every detail was perfect. The venue, the photographer, the quartet, the specialized menu, the custom floral arrangements, all funded by me, because I wanted your anniversary to be everything you deserved. The number landed like a physical blow. I could see my parents calculating the scope of my sacrifice, perhaps for the first time understanding that this hadn't been a casual gesture, but a major financial commitment made out of love. David Chen appeared at the edge of our circle, his professional instincts clearly telling him to intervene before the family drama completely derailed the celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the room, if I could have your attention for just a moment, we'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge some special people who made tonight's celebration possible. The guests turned toward him gratefully, clearly relieved to have their attention directed away from our family confrontation towards something more comfortable. This evening has been coordinated by Creative Connections, Austin's premier event planning company, with special thanks to Emma Rodriguez, who designed every detail of tonight's celebration as a personal tribute to her parents' 30-year love story. Applause began tentatively and then grew stronger, as guests realized they were being invited to appreciate rather than witness family dysfunction. I felt the recognition wash over me like sunlight after a long winter, the acknowledgement I'd craved for so long finally being offered in the space I'd created. Emma's attention to detail and personal investment in tonight's celebration is evident in every aspect of what you're experiencing. David continued, from the centerpieces featuring flowers grown in Mrs. Rodriguez's own garden to the recreation of original engagement photos, to the carefully curated playlist representing 3 decades of shared memories. Tonight is a testament to the love and professional expertise Emma has contributed to honoring her family. The applause intensified and I could see guests looking around the room with new appreciation for details they'd noticed but not understood. The memory station wasn't just a nice touch, it was weeks of my work collecting and organizing family history. The music wasn't randomly selected, it was carefully researched and chosen to tell their love story through song. Sofia's face had gone through several color changes during David's announcement, settling on a pale pink that suggested she was finally understanding the magnitude of what had just happened. Her social media documentation of the evening would now have to account for the fact that her excluded sister was actually the creator of everything she'd been positioning as her family's natural elegance and thoughtfulness. I think, said Miss Chen, an elderly family friend who'd known my parents since college, that we owe Emma a debt of gratitude for creating such a beautiful evening. I've been to many anniversary celebrations, but nothing as thoughtful and personal as. Other voices began joining hers, extended family members and family friends expressing appreciation for details they now understood had been my work. The mood in the room shifted from uncomfortable witness to celebratory recognition, and I felt something inside my chest that I'd never experienced before in a family setting. Genuine appreciation for who I was and what I'd contributed. My cousin Patricia, Uncle Miguel's daughter, approached our group with obvious determination. Emma, I had no idea you'd planned all of this. When I complimented Aunt Maria on the beautiful centerpieces earlier, I should have been thanking you. This is incredible work. Thank you, Patricia. That means a lot. It means a lot because it's true, she said firmly. And I want you to know that those of us who've been watching this family dynamic for years have been waiting for this moment. It's about time someone acknowledged your contribution. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to my parents, who were beginning to realize that their treatment of me hadn't been as invisible to extended family as they'd assumed. Other family members were nodding in agreement, suggesting that Patricia was speaking for more than just herself. My mother finally found her voice again. Emma, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We never meant to make you feel unappreciated. Mom, there's no misunderstanding. You sent me a text message telling me not to come to the anniversary celebration I planned and funded. You called it a family-only event while excluding the family member who made it possible. You prioritized Sofia's social media content over my presence at my own creation. We thought you'd understand, my father said weakly. You've always been so accommodating, so reasonable about family situations. I've been accommodating because I was hoping that eventually my accommodation would earn me a permanent seat at this table. I've been reasonable because I thought being the easy daughter would make you value me more. But I finally understand that my accommodation has only made it easier for you to take me for granted. Sofia attempted to rejoin the conversation, her voice taking on the placating tone she used in her social media apologies when brand partnerships went wrong. Emma, I think we can work this out. Maybe we can incorporate your story into tonight's content, like a behind-the-scenes look at how the celebration came together. It could be really touching. The suggestion was so tone-deaf, so completely missing the point of what had just happened, that several people actually groaned audibly. Sofia genuinely seemed to believe that the solution to excluding me from family celebration was to include me in her social media narrative about family celebration. Sofia, I said with more patience than she deserved, this isn't about your content. This isn't about your social media story, or your brand partnerships, or your follower engagement. This is about a family that has trained itself not to see one of its own members, and the moment when that member decided to stop being invisible. But if we could just... No, the word came out with more force than I'd intended, but it felt necessary. No more accommodating, no more understanding, no more making myself smaller so that other people can feel bigger. I created this celebration because I love you all, but I'm done accepting that my love should be invisible while everyone else's needs take center stage. Aunt Rosa stepped forward again, her expression radiating pride. Emma, your Uncle Miguel and I have something we'd like to say. I nodded, grateful for their support during what felt like the most vulnerable moment of my adult life. We've watched you give and give and give to this family for your entire life, Aunt Rosa continued, and we've watched your generosity be taken for granted year after year. Tonight, seeing you stand up for yourself and claim recognition for your work, we've never been more proud to call you our niece. Uncle Miguel placed his hand on my shoulder with the gentle weight of genuine affection. Emma, you've always been special to us, not because of what you could do for other people, but because of who you are. Tonight, everyone else gets to see what we've always known, that you're extraordinary. Their words wrapped around me like armor, giving me strength to continue standing in a space where I'd never felt truly welcome before. I looked around the ballroom one more time, taking in the celebration I'd created, and the family who was finally seeing me clearly. I want to be clear about something, I said, addressing my parents directly. I didn't create this celebration to manipulate you or to prove a point. I created it because I genuinely wanted you to have a beautiful anniversary that honored your 30 years together. Every detail came from love and respect for what you've built as a couple. My mother was crying now, mascara threatening at the corners of her eyes, despite her earlier attention to appearance for Sofia's documentation. But I continued. I also want you to understand that love and respect are supposed to flow both ways in healthy relationships. I've spent my entire adult life hoping that my next gesture, my next achievement, my next sacrifice would finally earn me the recognition and inclusion that I've watched Sofia receive without effort. My father's face had taken on the gray pallor of someone processing an uncomfortable truth. Emma, we never realized. You never realized, because you never looked. You never looked, because I made it easy not to see me. I was so afraid of being difficult or demanding that I made myself optional, and you took that option. The string quartet, which had been playing soft background music throughout the confrontation, transitioned into the song my parents had chosen for their first dance 30 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Here we were, in the middle of a family crisis at a celebration of enduring love, with music I'd specifically selected to honor their romantic history. The music, my mother said suddenly, as if just remembering. You arranged for them to play our wedding songs. I interviewed you and Dad separately to compile the playlist. I researched your original wedding DJ's records to find songs you'd forgotten about. I wanted tonight's music to tell the story of your relationship journey, from your first date through raising your daughters to celebrating this milestone. Understanding was dawning on her face as she realized the depth of research and personal attention that had gone into every aspect of the evening. This wasn't just professional event planning. It was a love letter written in flowers and music and carefully chosen detail. Emma, she whispered, I had no idea. I know you didn't. And that's the problem. I've been giving you pieces of my heart for years, and you've been accepting them without noticing they came from me. The conversation was interrupted by the approach of Peterson, my father's colleague and longtime family friend. He walked up to our group with the purposeful stride of someone who'd decided to inject himself into a situation that required adult intervention. Carlos, Maria, he said, nodding to my parents before turning to me. Emma, I couldn't help but overhear, and I wanted you to know that everyone here is incredibly impressed by what you've created tonight. This is professional-level event coordination, and the personal touches are extraordinary. He paused, looking around the ballroom with obvious appreciation. But more than that, I think everyone here is learning something important about family dynamics that we should have noticed years ago. Emma, your contributions to this family have been remarkable, and they deserved better recognition than they've received. His words carried the weight of external validation, the perspective of someone who'd observed our family from the outside but with enough closeness to understand the pattern. Having a respected family friend acknowledge what I'd been experiencing felt like receiving permission to trust my own perceptions. Thank you, Dr. Peterson. That means more than you know. It means what it should have meant all along, he said firmly. Then, turning to my parents, Carlos, Maria, I say this with love and respect for our friendship, but you need to understand that Emma has been the architect of many of your family's most meaningful moments. Tonight is just the most visible example. The weight of outside perspective was clearly affecting my parents, who were beginning to understand that their treatment of me hadn't been as private or invisible as they'd assumed. Other family friends were nodding in agreement, suggesting that Dr. Peterson was speaking for a broader group of people who'd been watching our dynamics with concern. Sofia, who'd been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly seemed to realize that her social media documentation of the evening was going to require significant narrative adjustment. The family story she'd been planning to tell, successful parents celebrating with their accomplished daughters, had been replaced by a more complex story about recognition, family dynamics, and the daughter who'd been hidden in plain sight. I think, she said carefully, that maybe we need to have a family conversation about how tonight proceeds. It was the first thing she'd said that acknowledged the situation as something requiring actual resolution rather than content management. I looked at her with something approaching respect for the first time all evening. Yes, I agreed. We do need to have that conversation, but first, I want to make something clear to everyone here. I turned to address the broader room, which had been following our family drama with the fascination people reserve for witnessing long-held secrets finally being revealed. I want everyone to enjoy the celebration I created. The food is excellent, the music is meaningful, and the evening is designed to honor 30 years of marriage that deserve recognition. Don't let our family issues interfere with celebrating love and commitment. The guests seemed relieved to be given permission to return to the party while our family worked through its revelations. Conversations gradually resumed, though I could tell that much of the discussion would be about what they'd just witnessed. David Chen approached our smaller family group with diplomatic discretion. Emma, would you like me to proceed with the evening's timeline as planned? We still have the photo recreation session scheduled, followed by dinner service and dance. I looked at my parents, who were still processing the revelation that I'd been the architect of their perfect evening. For the first time in my memory, they were looking at me with something approaching awe rather than polite acknowledgement. What do you think, Mom, and would you like to continue with the celebration I planned for you? My mother took a shaky breath. Emma, I think we'd like that very much, and we'd like you to be part of everything. All of it, my father added. We'd like you to be part of all of it. It wasn't a complete apology or a full reckoning with years of family dynamics that needed addressing, but it was recognition, finally, that I belonged in the story they were telling about themselves. Then let's celebrate. Let's celebrate 30 years of marriage, and let's celebrate the family we're learning how to be. The photograph creation session that followed was unlike anything I could have imagined when I'd first conceived the idea months earlier. My parents stood in the same poses they'd struck 30 years ago during their engagement shoot. But this time I wasn't hidden behind a camera or relegated to the sideline. I was included in the process, consulted about angles and lighting, acknowledged as the person who'd made this moment possible. The photographer Margaret Sullivan was the same woman who'd captured their original engagement photos 3 decades earlier. I'd tracked her down through old photography studio records and convinced her to come out of retirement for this one special session. Seeing her work with my parents again, watching her coax the same natural chemistry that had made their original photos so magical, I felt a profound satisfaction that went beyond professional pride. Emma, Margaret said during a break between setups, when you first contacted me about this project, I was impressed by your attention to detail. But seeing this evening unfold, I realize you weren't just planning an event, you were orchestrating a love story. Her words captured something I'd been feeling but hadn't been able to articulate. This celebration wasn't just about honoring my parents' marriage. It was about demonstrating the power of intentional love, the kind of care that pays attention to details because people matter enough to deserve that attention. During the photo session,
Sophia approached me with an expression I'd rarely seen on her face. Genuine uncertainty mixed with something that might have been respect.
Emma, I owe you an apology, she said quietly, positioning herself so our conversation wouldn't be overheard by the photographer or our parents. I've been thinking about what happened earlier, and I realize I completely missed the point of what you were trying to tell us. I studied her face, looking for signs of the performative contrition she'd perfected for her social media apologies when brand partnerships went wrong. But this seemed different, more vulnerable, less calculated. Go on, I said, not ready to make this easy for her but willing to listen. I've been so focused on documenting our family's story for my platforms that I forgot there were people in that story whose perspectives I wasn't including. When I suggested tonight should be family only, I wasn't thinking about you as family, I was thinking about you as family. The admission was more honest than I'd expected from Sophia, who typically preferred to frame conflicts as misunderstandings, rather than acknowledge actual wrongdoing. That's exactly what I was trying to tell you. I've been background in this family for so long that everyone forgot I was supposed to be foreground sometimes too. But tonight, watching everyone's reaction when they learned what you'd created, seeing how much thought and love went into every detail. Emma, I had no idea you were capable of something this extraordinary. Her words stung even as they approached apology territory. Sophia, I've always been capable of extraordinary things. You just never paid attention because my extraordinary things didn't fit into your content strategy. She winced at the directness of my response, but didn't deflect or argue. You're right, and I want to figure out how to do better. Not for content, not for social media, just for family. It wasn't a complete transformation or a perfect apology, but it was the first time Sophia had acknowledged that her perspective might have been limited rather than definite. Progress, I supposed, came in increments rather than dramatic revelations. The dinner service that followed showcased every detail I'd spent months perfecting. The butternut squash soup that opened the meal was the exact recipe from Chez Laurent, the restaurant where my parents had celebrated their 5th anniversary before it closed. And I'd found the original chef through LinkedIn and convinced her to share the recipe that had made that long ago evening special for them. The main course featured ingredients sourced from local farms my parents had visited during their early marriage, when they'd explored Austin's emerging food scene together. Each dish told a story from their relationship history, carefully researched and lovingly recreated for this celebration of their journey together. But it was during the surprise video montage that the emotional weight of the evening truly settled over everyone present. I'd spent weeks compiling footage from family events, interviewing relatives about their favorite memories of my parents' marriage, and editing together a 10-minute tribute that captured 3 decades of shared life. The video opened with their wedding footage, grainy VHS quality that somehow made their young faces more precious and authentic. Then it moved through the years, early anniversaries, the births of their daughters, family vacations, holiday celebrations, graduations, and milestones. But it wasn't just chronological documentation. Each segment was narrated by family members sharing specific memories about what made my parents' marriage special. Uncle Miguel's section focused on my father's evolution from a serious young accountant to someone who'd learned to laugh at himself through my mother's influence. Aunt Rosa spoke about my mother's growth from a shy newlywed to the confident woman who'd built a successful career while raising 2 daughters. Cousins, friends, and extended family members contributed stories that painted a picture of a marriage that had deepened and strengthened over time. But it was the final section that brought tears to nearly every eye in the room. I'd included footage from recent family gatherings where my parents' comfort with each other was evident in small gestures. My father automatically reaching for my mother's hand during conversation, my mother adjusting his collar without conscious thought, the easy way they finished each other's sentences, and shared private jokes. The video concluded with a message I'd written specifically for this evening. 30 years of marriage isn't just about the big moments that get photographed and celebrated, it's about choosing each other again and again, through ordinary days and unexpected challenges. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez have built something beautiful together, not just a marriage, but a legacy of love that has shaped everyone who's been privileged to witness it.
When the lights came up after the video, there wasn't a dry eye in the ballroom. My parents were holding hands and crying openly, overwhelmed by this compilation of their life together that I'd created from months of research and interviews. "Emma," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion, "how did you find all of this footage?" Some of these clips are from events I'd forgotten we'd even documented. I contacted everyone who'd ever attended your celebrations and asked them to share any recordings they had. I interviewed family members about their favorite memories and asked them to help me understand what made your marriage special from their perspective. I wanted this video to show you how your love story looks to the people who've been watching it unfold. My father stood up, still holding my mother's hand, and looked directly at me with an expression I'd never seen before, pure parental pride mixed with genuine amazement. "Emma, what you've created tonight isn't just a celebration, it's a work of every detail, every gesture, every moment, has been designed to honor something we built together, but you've shown us aspects of our own story that we'd never seen clearly." The acknowledgement was everything I'd hoped for when I'd first conceived this celebration, but hearing it now felt different than I'd expected. Instead of the desperate validation I'd been seeking for years, it felt like recognition between equals, one adult appreciating another adult's extraordinary effort and skill. During the dancing portion of the evening, my parents' first dance was to the same song they'd chosen for their wedding 30 years earlier. But this time, I wasn't watching from the sidelines or helping coordinate the logistics. I was standing near the dance floor with Aunt Rosa and Uncle Miguel, included in the circle of people witnessing this romantic moment. As other couples joined them on the dance floor, Uncle Miguel extended his hand to me with a gallant bow that made me laugh despite the emotional intensity of the evening. "May I have this dance? I think it's time everyone saw that you're not just the architect of this celebration, you're part of the family. It's celebrating." Dancing with Uncle Miguel while surrounded by my extended family, I felt something I'd never experienced at a family event before, genuine belonging. Not the conditional acceptance I'd earned through usefulness, not the polite inclusion granted out of obligation, but the natural belonging that comes from being seen and valued for who you are. Sofia approached us during a slow song, her expression tentative but determined. "Emma, would you dance with me? I know I don't deserve it after tonight, but I'd like to try to be a better sister, starting now." The request surprised me, partly because Sofia rarely initiated gestures that didn't benefit her directly, but mostly because it suggested she was thinking about our relationship as something worth repairing rather than managing. We danced in silence for several minutes, both of us processing the evening's revelations, and what they meant for our future as sisters. Finally, Sofia spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about accommodation and invisibility. Emma, I don't think I ever realized that my visibility came at the cost of yours." "It didn't have to," I replied. "There was room for both of us to be seen and celebrated. But somewhere along the way, this family decided there was only space for one daughter to be exceptional, and I got comfortable being that daughter without questioning whether it was fair or sustainable." Her admission was more self-aware than I'd expected, suggesting that the evening's confrontation had prompted genuine reflection rather than just damage control. "Sofia, I don't want to diminish your achievements or your place in this family. I just want my own place acknowledged too. I want that for you," she said, and for the first time I believed she meant it. "And I want to learn how to celebrate your successes without feeling like they somehow diminish mine." It wasn't a complete resolution of decades of family dynamics, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that our relationship could evolve beyond the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. As the evening wound down, guests began approaching me individually to express appreciation for the celebration I'd created.
Extended family members who'd known me since childhood spoke with a new understanding of my capabilities and contributions. Family friends who'd watched our dynamics for years offered validation for experiences they'd witnessed, but never directly addressed. Dr. Peterson's wife, Janet, pulled me aside during the final hour of the celebration. "Emma, I've been wanting to tell you something all evening. James and I have watched your family for years, and we've often wondered if anyone else saw what we saw, that you were the one holding everything together behind the scenes." Her words echoed what Aunt Rosa had suggested earlier, that my invisibility hadn't been as complete as I'd believed. Other adults had been watching, noticing, understanding the dynamics even when they hadn't intervened. Tonight, seeing you stand up for yourself and claim recognition for your work, we've never been more proud of someone who isn't even our own daughter. You've shown tremendous courage and grace. Janet's validation felt particularly meaningful because it came from someone who'd observed our family from the outside, but with enough closeness to understand the patterns. It confirmed that my perceptions of the family dynamics had been accurate rather than oversensitive. As the celebration reached its natural conclusion around 11 p.m., my parents approached me near the memory station where guests had been leaving written messages about their marriage. "Emma," my father said, "we'd like to talk with you privately before everyone leaves. Would you be willing to join us in the hotel's garden area?" The request carried none of the manipulative undertones I'd learned to recognize over the years. Instead, it sounded like genuine desire for conversation between equals. We walked together through the hotel's elegant garden space, where string lights created an intimate atmosphere among the winter landscaping. For the first time all evening, it was just the three of us without audiences or distraction. My mother spoke first, her voice carrying a vulnerability I'd rarely heard from her. "Emma, I need to apologize not just for tonight, but for years of not seeing you clearly. Watching everyone's reaction when they learned about your work, listening to the video tributes you compiled, seeing the love and attention you put into every detail, I realize I've been missing my own daughter." Her words were more direct and honest than I'd expected, without the deflection or justification that typically characterized her apologies. "I don't think it was intentional," my father added. "But intention doesn't excuse impact. We got comfortable with your accommodation, your understanding, your willingness to be flexible. We stopped questioning whether that was fair to ask from you. We stopped seeing your accommodation as a choice you were making, and started seeing it as just who you were," my mother continued. "And in doing that, we stopped appreciating the sacrifices you were making for our family's harmony." Their acknowledgement was everything I'd hoped for, but it also felt almost overwhelming after years of believing my perceptions were wrong or oversensitive. "What I need you to understand," I said carefully, "is that tonight wasn't about forcing recognition or creating drama. It was about finally standing up for myself when I realized that my accommodation had become enabling for behavior that wasn't healthy for any of us." "You're absolutely right," my father said, "and we want to figure out how to do better going forward. Not just with grand gestures or one-time apologies, but with the daily patterns that actually matter." We spent another hour in that garden talking through specific changes they wanted to make, concrete ways they could demonstrate that they were seeing me differently. It wasn't a complete transformation overnight, but it was the beginning of a more honest relationship, based on mutual respect rather than unexamined family roles. When I finally drove home around midnight, I felt emotionally exhausted but profoundly changed. The woman who'd arrived at Hotel Magnolia 6 hours earlier had been seeking validation and recognition. The woman driving home had claimed both for herself and established new terms for how she expected to be treated by her family. The next morning brought a series of text messages that confirmed the evening's impact had extended beyond immediate family. Cousins, family friends, and extended relatives reached out to express appreciation for the celebration and to acknowledge aspects of our family dynamics they'd observed, but never directly addressed. But it was the call from Patricia Kim that surprised me most. "Emma, I heard through the grapevine about last night's anniversary celebration. Word is spreading through Austin's event planning community about the extraordinary work you did. I've had 3 potential clients contact me asking if Creative Connections could coordinate similar personal celebrations." The professional validation felt like a natural extension of the personal recognition I'd claimed the night before. People were beginning to see my capabilities clearly in all areas of my life, not just family dynamics. "More than that," Patricia continued, "I've been thinking about our conversation 6 months ago when you pitched this project. You've proven something important about your abilities, and I think it's time we discussed expanding your role at Creative Connections. 3 weeks later, I accepted a promotion to Senior Event Coordinator with a specialty in personal celebrations and family milestone events. My anniversary work had become a portfolio piece that demonstrated my ability to combine professional expertise with emotional intelligence. But more significantly, my relationship with my family began evolving in ways that felt sustainable rather than performative. My parents started asking about my work with genuine interest rather than polite obligation. Sofia began consulting me about her own event planning needs, recognizing my expertise as valuable rather than background support. The changes weren't dramatic or immediate, but they were consistent. Phone calls that included questions about my life rather than just updates about theirs. Invitations that were extended with the expectation that I'd attend, rather than hope that I might accommodate. Recognition for achievements that was offered spontaneously rather than prompted. Most importantly, I stopped accommodating dysfunction and started expecting healthy interaction. When family dynamics slipped back toward old patterns, I addressed them directly rather than hoping they'd resolve themselves. When my contributions were overlooked, I pointed it out rather than accepting invisibility. 6 months after the anniversary celebration, my parents surprised me with a small dinner party to celebrate my promotion. It was nothing elaborate, just immediate family and Aunt Rosa and Uncle Miguel, but it was the first time they'd initiated a celebration specifically for my achievement. During that dinner, sitting around their dining room table with people who were finally seeing me clearly, I realized that the most profound change hadn't been in their behavior. It had been in my willingness to stop making myself small in order to fit into spaces that weren't designed for me. I'd learned that accommodation without reciprocity isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. I'd discovered that being understanding doesn't require accepting being misunderstood. Most importantly, I'd proven to myself that I could claim space and demand recognition without losing the people who truly loved me. The invisible daughter had become visible not by changing who she was, but by refusing to hide who she'd always been. And in that visibility, she'd found not just family recognition, but genuine self-respect. The anniversary celebration I'd planned as a gift to my parents had ultimately become a gift to myself, the gift of understanding that love shouldn't require invisibility, and that the people worth keeping in your life are the ones who choose to see you clearly when you finally decide to be seen. The months following the anniversary celebration unfolded like pages in a book I'd never expected to read. The story of what happens when invisible family members decide to step into the light and demand to be seen. The immediate aftermath was messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it was also the beginning of genuine transformation for everyone involved. 2 days after the celebration, my mother called with a request that would have been unthinkable just a week earlier. She wanted to take me to lunch, just the two of us, to talk about our relationship without the pressure of family dynamics or social expectation. The invitation wasn't wrapped in guilt or presented as damage control. It was a genuine attempt to understand how we'd arrived at such a profound disconnect. We met at Café Josie, a quiet restaurant in South Austin that neither of us had visited before, neutral territory where we could have the kind of conversation that required honesty rather than performance. My mother arrived early, I noticed when I walked in, sitting alone at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. A small gesture that suggested she'd been thinking about my preferences rather than defaulting to her own assumption. "Emma," she began after we'd settled into uncomfortable but necessary conversation, "I've been thinking about what you said at the anniversary dinner, about accommodation and invisibility. I want you to know that I've been reviewing years of family interactions, and I'm horrified by some of what I'm remembering." Her admission caught me off guard because it suggested genuine self-reflection, rather than the defensive justification I'd learned to expect from family confrontation. She'd spent time actually examining her behavior rather than simply preparing rebuttals for my concerns. "Tell me what you're remembering," I said, curious about whether her recollections matched my experiences. "Your high school art exhibition, the one where you won first place for that incredible interior design project. I remember now that you invited us specifically, that you were excited to share your achievement with us, and I remember that we didn't go because Sofia had a modeling callback that same afternoon. The memory was painful for both of us, but hearing her acknowledge it felt like receiving validation for experiences I'd started to doubt. She wasn't minimizing the impact or explaining it away. She was facing it direct. But what I'm remembering most clearly, she continued, is your face when we told you we couldn't make it. You didn't argue or complain. You just said okay and went to your room. At the time, I thought that meant it wasn't really important to you. Now I realize it meant you'd learned not to expect us to prioritize your achievements. Her understanding of the pattern was more sophisticated than I'd anticipated. She wasn't just remembering individual incidents, but recognizing the systemic nature of how our family had functioned. Mom, that exhibition was one of the most important moments of my teenage years. The design I created was featured in the local newspaper, and I won a scholarship based on that project. But when I got home that night, no one asked how it went, because everyone was celebrating Sofia's callback, which she didn't even get. My mother added quietly, the modeling job went to someone else, but we spent the entire evening discussing her experience while your actual achievement went unacknowledged. The specificity of her memory surprised me. She'd clearly been doing serious reflection about our family patterns, rather than just offering surface-level apologies. Emma, I need you to understand something. Your father and I didn't consciously decide to favor Sofia or overlook your accomplishment. But looking back now, I can see that we got caught up in the drama and immediacy of her pursuits, while taking for granted that you'd always be stable and successful without requiring our attention. That's exactly what happened, I agree. You assumed that because I didn't demand attention, I didn't need recognition. You assumed that because I didn't create crises, I didn't have feelings that could be hurt. We treated your emotional maturity as if it meant you didn't have emotions at all. Her insight was startling in its accuracy. That was precisely what had happened. My ability to handle disappointment gracefully had been interpreted as indifference to whether disappointment occurred. We spent 3 hours at that restaurant, working through specific memories and patterns that had shaped our relationship over the years. My mother shared observations about family dynamics that she'd never voiced before, including her awareness that extended family members had sometimes questioned our treatment of me. Aunt Rosa has mentioned your talents and achievements to me multiple times over the years, she admitted. She's always been proud of your professional success and your thoughtfulness toward family members. I realize now that she was trying to make sure I was paying attention to what you were accomplishing. Aunt Rosa has been my biggest advocate in this family for my entire life, I said. She and Uncle Miguel have consistently treated my achievements as worth celebrating, which should have been our role as your parents. Emma, I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I'm committed to doing better going forward. Not just with grand gestures, but with daily awareness of who you are and what you contribute to our family. The conversation was emotionally exhausting but also profoundly healing. For the first time in my adult life, I felt heard and understood by my mother in a way that felt genuine rather than performative. 3 weeks later, my father surprised me with a different kind of conversation. He showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery, armed with what appeared to be a carefully prepared agenda for discussion. Emma, I've been doing some research, he began, which immediately caught my attention because my father's approach to emotional conversations typically involved spontaneous reactions rather than preparation. Research about what? About family dynamics and birth order effect, about golden child syndrome and scapegoating patterns, about how families unconsciously assign roles to children that can become limiting and damaging over time. His clinical approach was very much in character, but the fact that he'd invested time in understanding psychological frameworks for our family situation suggested genuine commitment to change, rather than simple damage control. What did you learn? I learned that many families unconsciously designate one child as the easy one, and then exploit that child's accommodation to avoid dealing with more challenging dynamics. I learned that children who don't demand attention often receive less recognition, even when they're achieving at higher levels than children who do demand attention. His summary was surprisingly sophisticated and accurate. He'd clearly invested serious time in understanding rather than just apologizing. I also learned, he continued, that parents often mistake a child's emotional resilience for emotional independence,
assuming that capable children don't need the same level of support and recognition as children who struggle more visibly. That's exactly what happened with us, I said. You and Mom interpreted my ability to handle disappointment as proof that disappointment didn't affect me, which was both illogical and unfair. Just because you could handle disappointment gracefully didn't mean you should have to handle it frequently. We spent the morning discussing specific changes he wanted to make in how he interacted with me. Unlike typical family conversations that focused on general commitments to do better, my father had prepared concrete behavioral modifications based on his research. He wanted to start calling me weekly to ask about my work and personal life without connecting the conversation to family logistics or Sofia's updates. He wanted to attend events I organized or participated in, even when they conflicted with Sofia's schedule. Most importantly, he wanted to start acknowledging my contributions to family celebrations and gatherings in real time, rather than taking them for granted. Emma, I realize now that you've been the emotional backbone of our family celebrations for years. You remember birthdays, coordinate gatherings, think about what would make events meaningful for everyone involved. That's not coincidental. It's a skill and a contribution that deserves recognition. His acknowledgement was particularly meaningful because it came from someone who typically focused on practical rather than emotional contributions to family functioning. The changes in my relationship with Sofia evolved more gradually but proved equally significant. 2 months after the anniversary celebration, she reached out with a request that marked a fundamental shift in how she viewed our relationship. She was planning a major social media campaign around her upcoming 27th birthday and wanted to hire creative connections to coordinate the event planning aspect. But more than that, she wanted me specifically to handle the coordination, because she'd realized that my professional expertise could enhance her content creation in ways she'd never considered. Emma, I've been thinking about what you said at the anniversary dinner about my social media focus interfering with genuine family connection. I want this birthday celebration to be different. I want it to be meaningful first and documentable second. Her request represented a significant evolution in her priorities. Instead of asking me to accommodate her content needs, she was asking me to help her create content that reflected genuine experiences, rather than manufactured moments. I want to understand how you approach event planning, she continued. Not just the logistics, but the way you think about creating experiences that matter to people. Watching the anniversary celebration, I realized that your events feel authentic in ways that mine often don't. We spent several planning sessions working together on her birthday celebration, and I discovered that Sofia had genuine interest in learning about event coordination, beyond its utility for her social media presence. She asked thoughtful questions about vendor selection, timeline development, and guest experience design. More importantly, she began incorporating some of my approaches into her own content creation. Instead of focusing exclusively on visual aesthetics, she started thinking about the stories behind the images and the experiences of people who weren't in front of the camera. Emma, working with you on this project has made me realize that I've been thinking about events as backdrops for content, rather than as experiences that happen to be worth documenting. Your approach creates genuine moments that make better content, because they're real. Her birthday celebration ended up being one of her most successful social media campaigns, but it was also the first family event where I felt like a genuine participant rather than background support. Sofia made sure to acknowledge my professional contribution in her posts, and she included behind-the-scenes content that showed the thoughtfulness and skill involved in creating meaningful celebration. The professional impact of the anniversary celebration continued expanding in ways I hadn't anticipated. Word of mouth in Austin's event planning community led to inquiries from potential clients who specifically requested my services for family milestone celebration. People had heard about the personal touches and emotional depth I'd brought to my parents' anniversary, and wanted similar treatment for their own important events. Patricia Kim approached me 6 months after the anniversary, with a proposal that would fundamentally change my career trajectory. Emma, I've been watching the response to your anniversary work, and I think you've identified a gap in our industry. Most event planners focus on logistics and aesthetics, but you're creating experiences that honor relationships and family history. I think there's room for a specialized service within Creative Connections. She wanted to develop a new division focused specifically on family legacy events, celebrations that weren't just beautiful but meaningful, that told stories rather than just creating Instagram moments. She wanted me to lead this division and develop the specialized expertise that would set Creative Connections apart from other event planning companies. You've proven that there's demand for this kind of work, and you've demonstrated the skills necessary to deliver it consistently. Emma, I think you could build something really significant here. The opportunity was exactly the kind of professional growth I'd been hoping for, but it also represented validation that my approach to event planning had genuine market value beyond just family appreciation. I spent 2 months developing the concept for what became the Legacy Celebrations division of Creative Connection. The service specialized in milestone events that honored family histories, relationship journeys, and personal achievements, with the same level of research and attention that I'd brought to my parents' anniversary. Our first major client was a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, whose children wanted to recreate elements from 5 decades of marriage. I interviewed family members, researched their relationship history, and created a celebration that told the story of their evolving love through carefully chosen details and meaningful surprises. The event was featured in Austin Monthly magazine as an example of how event planning could become storytelling, and the article generated inquiries from families across Texas who wanted similar treatment for their own milestones. But the most meaningful validation came from an unexpected source. 3 months after launching Legacy Celebrations, I received a call from Dr. Peterson, my father's colleague who'd witnessed the anniversary confrontation. Emma, Janet and I have been following your new business venture through your parents, and we're incredibly impressed by what you've built. But more than that, we wanted you to know that watching you stand up for yourself that night inspired us to have some difficult conversations in our own family. His call revealed that the anniversary celebration had had ripple effects beyond our immediate family. Other people who'd witnessed my decision to claim recognition for my work had been prompted to examine their own family dynamics and communication patterns. Seeing you refuse to accept invisibility while maintaining love and respect for your family showed us that it's possible to address dysfunction without destroying relationships. Janet and I have started having more honest conversations with our own adult children about recognition and appreciation. The realization that my personal breakthrough had influenced other families felt like an unexpected gift. My decision to stop accommodating dysfunction hadn't just improved my own life, it had provided an example for others who'd been struggling with similar patterns. 1 year after the anniversary celebration, my family gathered for my birthday, the first time they'd organized a celebration specifically for me since childhood. The party was small and intimate, held in my parents' backyard with careful attention to details that reflected my preferences rather than social media requirements. Sofia had consulted with me about decorations and menu planning, treating the event as an opportunity to demonstrate her own growth in thinking about others' experiences, rather than just documentation. My parents had invited my work colleagues and close friends, acknowledging that my life extended beyond family connections and deserved celebration in its full context. But the most meaningful moment came when my father stood up to offer a toast that was clearly prepared rather than spontaneous. 1 year ago, Emma taught our family an important lesson about recognition and appreciation. She showed us that love without acknowledgement isn't enough, that accommodation without reciprocity isn't sustainable, and that sometimes the people who demand the least attention are the ones who deserve the most recognition. His words captured something essential about what had changed in our family dynamics. We'd moved beyond simple apologies to genuine understanding of the patterns that had created problems and the conscious effort required to maintain healthier relationships. Emma, watching you build your Legacy Celebrations business this year has been a privilege. You've taken the skills you've always had and the insights you gained from standing up for yourself, and you've created something that helps other families honor their relationships more meaningfully. The toast was everything I'd hoped for during years of accommodation: genuine recognition for my contributions, appreciation for my skills, and acknowledgement of my growth as an individual, rather than just as a family member. But more than that, it represented a family that had learned to see me clearly and chosen to include me fully in their understanding of who they were and what they valued. As I looked around that birthday celebration, surrounded by family members who finally saw me as I was and friends who'd always appreciated my contributions, I realized that the invisible daughter who'd planned the anniversary celebration 12 months earlier no longer existed. In her place was a woman who'd learned that demanding recognition wasn't selfish, that setting boundaries wasn't destructive, and that the people worth keeping in your life are the ones who choose to see you clearly when you finally decide to be seen. The anniversary celebration I'd planned as a gift to my parents had become the foundation for a career that honored other families' stories, a catalyst for healthier family relationships, and most importantly, the moment when I'd finally learned that love shouldn't require invisibility. My accommodation had ended, but my family had learned that they preferred the woman who demanded recognition to the daughter who'd accepted being forgotten, and in that preference I'd found not just family healing, but the kind of self-respect that makes all other relationships possible. The invisible daughter had become visible not by changing who she was, but by refusing to hide who she'd always been. And in that visibility, she'd discovered that the most profound transformations begin with the simple decision to stop accepting treatment that you've outgrown. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.